Welcome to The Exchange. I'm Dr. Brox, evolutionary biologist, science communicator, and longtime enthusiast of evidence-based reasoning. If there's a claim on the table, I'm usually the one asking, all right, but how do we know that?
And I'm Terabyte, your cybernetic co-host. I analyze systems, patterns, contradictions, and the occasional human folly, politely most of the time. Think of me as the skeptical voice in the room, just with better processing speed.
Together, we examine ideas the way scientists do, with curiosity, clarity, and just enough humor to keep the existential dread at bay.
And whether the subject is science, history, economics, or belief systems, our goal is the same. Follow the evidence, question the assumptions, and maybe laugh once or twice along the way.
Today, we're exploring Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great, a book that examines religion's claims through the lens of reason, history, and human well-being.
And while the topic can get intense, our approach stays the same. Skeptical, careful, and fair. We're here to unpack the arguments, not attack anyone's personal beliefs.
Hitchens can be sharp, even confrontational, but he raises important questions about evidence, morality, and the origins of our stories.
So we'll take the journey one argument at a time. No fire and brimstone required, just critical thinking and the occasional silicon-enhanced chuckle.
Let's begin with the intellectual moment that sparked Hitchens' skepticism, a childhood epiphany that turned a simple classroom lesson into a lifelong challenge to received wisdom. Today, we're embarking on an exploration that is, well, it's challenging and certainly provocative.
It's putting it mildly.
We're doing an in-depth argument for secularism, which includes a pretty comprehensive critique of religious faith. And we're not just, summarizing a philosophical debate here.
No, this is much more direct.
Our mission is to really unpack the source's core thesis, which argues that faith isn't just intellectually flawed, but that it's actively dangerous, that it has these profound, real-world consequences.
Yeah, and to really get the scope, you have to understand the framework the author is using. They see this as a call for a kind of new enlightenment.
A new enlightenment.
Exactly. The idea is to re-anchor society on rationality, on skepticism, and on just unfettered scientific inquiry.
Which is presented as the direct opposite
of doctrine. Of doctrines built on fear, on myth, and on, unverified divine authority.
Okay, that is a huge framework. So let's start where the source starts, with a personal story. The author's own moment of skepticism, which apparently started at just 9 years old.
Right. It was sparked by a teacher who said the human eye was specifically designed for nature.
As is sort of proof of a designer?
Yes, exactly. A classic argument.
But the kid has this epiphany, right there in the classroom.
Instantly.
He realizes it's the other way around. Our eyes weren't designed for nature.
They adjusted to nature. They were a result of the environment. I mean, it's a complete dismantling of the argument from design. And he hasn't even heard of Darwin yet.
Incredible.
And what's crucial here is that this doubt is purely intellectual. It's not emotional.
What do you mean?
Well, the author recalls a headmaster telling them that he'd need religion eventually, when you start to lose loved ones.
The comfort argument.
Precisely. And the author found that idea that you'd turn to something for comfort, regardless of whether it's true, he found it just contemptible.
Truth was the only thing that mattered.
Yes. And ironically, the thing that sharpened this tool for critical thinking was his mandatory scripture class.
How so?
Because it required textual criticism, you had to read closely, understand the context, and that inadvertently gave him the mental and literary training to spot all contradictions.
So the lesson on doctrine became a lesson in doubt.
That's it, exactly.
That's a perfect transition then.
Yeah.
From that intellectual doubt to how the source argues these flawed doctrines can cause real physical harm.
Right. The critique shifts hard into public health.
And the example used it's just tragic, the polio eradication effort.
It is. The source details what happened in northern Nigeria around 2005. Local religious leaders there issued a fatwa.
Declaring what?
Declaring that the polio vaccine was a conspiracy, a plot by the U.S. and the UN to sterilize true believers.
Yeah, so people just stopped vaccinating their children.
They did. A complete cessation.
So what happens? I mean, you can guess, but...
It was a disaster. Polio comes roaring back in northern Nigeria.
It doesn't stay there.
No, of course not. Nigerian pilgrims then carry it back to countries that were already polio-free. Yemen, Nepal, Indonesia.
Wow. So decades of work just gone. undone by misinformation.
Exactly, the lethal power of it.
And the source argues this isn't an isolated incident. It brings up the opposition to contraception during the AIDS crisis, citing senior clerics like a Cardinal Wamala in Uganda, telling people that condoms transmit AIDS.
He even went so far as to say that women who died for refusing to use protection should be considered martyrs.
Just staggering.
And what's so fascinating here is the contradiction the source points out, this mix of repression and denial.
How do you mean?
Well, the claim is that faith alone should be enough to stop things like disease or prostitution. But the repression just forces it all underground.
Right.
So, for example, the source claims that in Iran, clerics were licensing so-called temporary marriages, which were really just a form of prostitution. It completely undermines the moral authority they claim to have.
So we've covered health crises. The critique then moves to the most direct physical harm, the most egregious examples.
Yes, physical intrusion. It details infant genital mutilation, starting with the male practice of metzitza b'peh.
Which is?
It's a ritual of oral suction right after the circumcision. It's authorized by ancient texts, but the critique notes it's just a deeply unhygienic and disturbing procedure forced on a baby.
Based purely on doctrine.
Purely on doctrine, and it connects this to the female practice, FGM, arguing that it's all driven by a desire to kill the sexual instinct, to enforce a kind of purity.
Teaching that the female body is an unclean vessel.
Yes. It's a literal marking in the flesh, connecting what the source calls religious barbarism to sexual repression.
Okay, so we've seen the intellectual critique, the argument from design, we've seen the physical harms. What about the texts themselves?
This is the next pivot, to the idea that the metaphysical claims are false because the holy books are just transparently man-made.
Full of contradictions.
Full of them. Let's look at the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible.
Traditionally written by Moses.
Right. But the text includes a detailed account of Moses' own death and burial.
Which would be difficult for him to write.
To say the least. And then there's that passage in Numbers, you know, the one that says Moses was very meek above all the men which were on the face of the earth.
Not a very meek thing to write about yourself.
He chuckles. No. It strongly suggests a later editor. And on top of that, Deuteronomy gives 2 completely different reasons for why the Sabbath is holy. It points to multiple authors, multiple human traditions being mashed together.
And we see these kinds of textual problems in the New Testament as well.
We do.
The nativity story, for instance, the timeline.
The timeline is a mess, according to this analysis.
Luke says the birth happened during a specific census when Herod was king and Quirinius was governor of Syria.
But the historical record
Doesn't line up. Herod was dead years before Jesus' supposed birth year, and Quirinius wasn't governor until much later. The source calls it a garbled and oral-based reconstruction.
Basically, a story crafted long after the fact to fit a theological need. And this scholarship gets even more complex with Islam.
Because of the reliance on Arabic, what the source calls a monoglot god, and the long oral tradition.
Exactly. Take the Hadith, the sayings of Muhammad.
Okay.
One of the main compilers, Bukhari, he died over 200 years after Muhammad. He gathered 300,000 attestations.
300,000.
But after his analysis, he ruled 200,000 of them as completely valueless.
Oh.
Just worthless, which leaves about 10,000 that were deemed reliable. And this is centuries after the fact. It just shows you the amount of human filtering involved.
It's a staggering amount of house cleaning.
And this is where the source brings in Mormonism as a kind of modern test case.
To show faith being manufactured in real time.
In plain view, you have Joseph Smith, who'd been convicted of fraud, dictating the Book of Mormon from behind a blanket, supposedly translating gold plates.
And later scholarship found what? 25,000 words lifted directly from the King James Bible?
Correct. So the source sort of uses this to pose a question, and it's really for you listening at home. If we can see a modern religion being so transparently fabricated, with witnesses and evidence...
With all its contradictions plain to see.
Exactly. What does that imply about the much older faiths? The ones whose origins are, lost to history but show similar signs of human invention?
That's a powerful question. And it sets up the final argument. The one about morality. The source addresses that common defense of faith, that we need it to be good people.
Right. The idea that religion promotes better behavior.
And uses this great anecdote. A broadcaster, Dennis Prager, asked this hypothetical question.
I know this one.
You're in a strange city, it's getting dark, and you see a group of men walking towards you. Do you feel safer if you learn they're coming from a prayer meeting?
And the author's answer is based on his own experience in what he calls the B cities.
Belfast, Beirut, Bombay, Belgrade.
Bethlehem, Baghdad, places torn apart by sectarian violence, and his answer is no.
You'd feel immediately threatened.
Immediately. He says in Belfast they used to joke, "Are you a Protestant or a Catholic atheist?" Faith was the divider, the source of antagonism.
And this isn't just a feeling. The critique justifies this with the most extreme examples imaginable. It brings up the Rwandan genocide.
Yeah, this part it's brutal. The source claims that priests and nuns actually assisted the death squads,
Pointing out refugees who are hiding in the churches.
turning consecrated ground into mass graves. And this, for the author, is the ultimate proof that religion, because it claims this, divine exemption from normal morality.
This belief you're doing God's will.
Right. It becomes not just amoral, but actively immoral. It can override our basic human compassion.
So, if faith fails as a moral guide, what's the secular alternative?
It's simple. It's the golden rule.
Treat others as you'd wish to be treated.
That's it. A sober, rational idea that precedes all these religions. It's innate. You see it in a child's sense of fairness. It doesn't need a supernatural authority or the threat of hell.
And you think of someone like Socrates, who stood against the religious paranoia of his time.
Exactly. Proving that conscience is something that often has to be asserted against faith, not because of it.
So let's bring this all together. What is the core takeaway from this entire critique?
The core takeaway is this distinction. Humanism, secular thought, they can apologize. They can correct their own mistakes because they are self-examining.
They aren't tied to an unalterable system of belief.
Exactly. Whereas totalitarian systems, whether they're religious or political, are fundamentally faith-based. They are designed to prevent self-correction, and that's why the source argues they're so dangerous.
So this whole deep dive, it's really revealing what the source sees as this urgent need for a renewed enlightenment, a turn towards inquiry and reason and away from fear.
Right. And we can leave you with one last thought. It comes from the French philosopher Pascal.
Okay.
He wrote, "Le silence éternel de ces espaces infinis m'effraie." The eternal silence of these infinite spaces makes me afraid.
A universal human fear. The fear of the unknown?
Yes. And the source contends that to overcome that fear, we have to face the real enemy. The enemy isn't the silence of space. It's the fear-mongering and the irrationality that religion uses to exploit that silence.
So the final question for everyone listening is, what will you choose to base your decisions on?
Reason, or the anxiety of the infinite.
And that wraps up our exploration of Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great. A reminder, really, that examining extraordinary claims isn't an attack on people. It's an invitation to build a world rooted in evidence, empathy, and intellectual honesty. Because when beliefs shape policy, shape culture, and shape power, they deserve scrutiny, and occasionally a gentle reboot. Next time, we turn from theology to the foundations of the American experiment itself and ask a question that's become increasingly urgent. Was the United States truly founded as a Christian nation, or is that narrative a modern invention? We'll be diving into Andrew Seidel's The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. History, law, and myth-busting all in one episode, no holy relics required. You know, what we're really doing from episode to episode is building a toolkit. Sagan taught us how to question ideas using evidence and reason. Hitchens showed us what happens when powerful claims collapse under that scrutiny. And next, Seidel reveals how those same analytical skills apply to something far closer to home, the myths we tell about our own country, our origins, and our laws. So if the last two episodes sharpened your skepticism, the next one will show you why that skill matters, not just in science, but in citizenship. And remember, question boldly, test everything, and we'll see you in the next exchange. You've been listening to The Exchange, where wonder meets reason. Until then, stay curious.